Hey Randy, how you doing today? So I'm with Randy Lieberman. He's the CEO of Earned. It's a tax firm that specializes in R&D tax credits. So prior to forming Earned, Randy has had over 30 years experience in finance and tax, including working at Nestle, JP Morgan, and at a boutique venture capital firm. So Randy conducted his first R&D tax credit study in 2014, so 10 years ago. So a little bit about Earned. So Earned uncovers hidden treasure. So his team helps companies recycle their R&D tax investments in new or improved products, processes, or software by identifying and claiming R&D tax credits they have earned. So earned is EARND. It's earned.co is his website. So, and the companies he helps, they can put money back in their pockets. I mean, that's the big thing here, right, Randy?
Absolutely.
So, tell us kind of what was the objective behind establishing R&D tax credits? So R&D is research and development. What was the objective of doing that?
So the ultimate objective was to stimulate innovation. And by incentivizing it financially, companies will basically engage in experimentation and take on the risk that such projects may not succeed. The projects may be developing a new product, a new
Okay.
formula, a new invention, or writing software. Without such incentive, though, there's less of a impetus to make those investments. And ultimately, the goal was to create that investment in the United States. So it's a U.S. Tax credit that we're focused on, albeit other countries do have similar type stimuluses for domestic innovation as well in their respective countries.
Okay. Okay. So this is federal tax credit you're talking about, right?
It's a federal tax credit, but there's also approximately 39 states, plus or minus, from year to year, also have a derivative of the credit as well. And they too are seeking to stimulate innovation within their own states. And so
Awesome.
they may have some other areas that they focus on, like geography, opportunity zones, or enterprise zones, or maybe particular industries.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell us like an example of, maybe you don't have to give specifics, but tell us like an example of a company you've helped and like what kind of return, what kind of an R&D tax credit they got, what they were, what area they were innovating in.
Sure. So, and we've worked across industries. So the interesting thing about the credit is it's not, a lot of times when people hear R&D tax credit, first they often think they're not eligible when they are. And that's probably the biggest mistake is companies assuming while they're so focused on building their business, they don't realize that they might be eligible for a tax credit. And so they're, as you said earlier, leaving money on the table. Relative to the industries, it's across the spectrum from software and technology, but it could be aerospace and defense, agriculture, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods, materials, medical devices. I'll give two quick examples. One in the agricultural space, which is we have a
Okay.
client who is a startup flying drones over fields, wrote software to capture the data off of the drone, combined that with data from imagery, and used it to try to determine what additional planting they should do, where they should do weeding, and subsequently built robots, mini harvesters, to help automate the harvesting process. So there was software in this case and robotics and hardware. We were able to capture all of those credits, which because the company was less than 5 years old and less than 5 million annual revenues, they were actually able to leverage and utilize that credit to offset payroll taxes. In other cases, we've worked with medical device companies. One's got a little mini robot that they literally can move within someone's stomach to take real-time video and use that obviously for diagnostic issues. In that particular case, the whole pursuit of the credit actually helped them actually ultimately get their next round of capital because it was able to communicate to prospective investors that they were very responsible relative to their investments. And I could certainly go on with other types of scenarios in other industries.
Wow. So I've never heard of that. But so these back to your agriculture example, they building robots too to
So they leveraged commercial drones and then wrote software to capture that data. But yeah, they literally built small little mini harvesters that could actually go through and help in the automation process. So are they going to, I mean, at one level, they're competing against John Deere, major global company that's been around for
Right,
close to a
right,
century. Are they a direct competitor? Probably not realistically, based on the size of farms that they're able to support. But what they're doing is incredibly innovative. And if it weren't for certain, to raise the capital, to make such investments, companies need more. Companies, to me, when I look at this as a former venture capitalist, I mean, every dollar is oxygen. And so, to the extent that the tax credits could help them have additional capital to pursue additional investments, huge opportunity. And it may be the difference between getting to that next payroll.
right, right. Yeah, I think the smaller companies, you and I both work with smaller companies, and a lot of them are bootstrapping. These
For
are
sure. Right.
owner operators that, maybe that's their life savings, they're spending. So every single penny really matters
Absolutely.
to them. And so it's great that there are tax specialists like you out there. And I know you really care about their businesses. You care about them and you want them to see them succeed,
Absolutely.
and that they should know about you. They should know about the R&D tax credits that are available to them and how they can take advantage of those things to, at least, extend their burn rate, right?
Well,
You
and
like
I'll
you
go
said,
one step further. And
2 months.
you were kind enough to share my background, but I didn't know about this. I mean, this is really, and yes, I'll repeat the whole trade and treasure, but I was a beneficiary, not immediately. It wasn't that I waited 25 years after working for Nestle to do my first credit because I wanted to wait. I didn't know
Yeah.
about it. I didn't know about it when I worked at Nestle,
Yes.
biggest consumer
Yes.
packaging company in the world. I certainly didn't know about it when I worked for JP Morgan. A few people have heard of them as well. Didn't know about it when it was on the venture side. And as an
Yeah.
operator, one of the companies I'd invested in, I went on board, helped grow, thinking it would be a year or two, turned into about 12. And it wasn't until a decade later that I was having dial constantly asking our CPAs and others about, is there something worth pursuing? And I was told it wasn't until I ultimately got connected with a team that said not only was it worth pursuing, when we finally did the study, we in that case found over $1 million. And that to me was the light bulb moment of this is an incredible opportunity. And as I spent more time and more years sort of talking to others, realizing it's just not well known.
Yeah. Yeah. So in that case where you found $1 million, how much was spent? So what was the return? What were they
So,
able to re
so it's a
to
it's a
recoup?
great question, and probably the best way to look at it is more uh, the R&D tax credit's not driven by revenues. Now, revenues can influence how it gets applied, but it's really a function of what's qualified research. And so there's tests for what's qualified research. The company has to be investing in development of a business component. That could be any type of new or improved product, process, formula, invention, or software. They need to be taking on technical risk. There needs to be, so hard sciences. That could be engineering, that could be computer science, chemistry,
Yeah.
biology, physics.
Mhm.
They may take on financial risk. There needs to be uncertainty as to whether or not the project will work. And so at the onset, you can't know capability or method or, certainly what's going to be designed. You might know some of those things, but the whole objective is to test hypothesis, test assumptions, and then evaluate those outcomes. With that said, though, at the
Right.
federal level, from an economic standpoint, the
Uh-huh.
credit is anywhere from 8 to 10%, depending on if it's a startup, it'll be at 10%. If it's a
Wow.
mature company, it might be 8%. But in the case of a startup, federal, the rule of thumb we like to use is for every $1 million invested, it's a $100,000 credit that could either be used against payroll taxes, reducing those taxes, or against taxable income when a company starts making money. And whatever they can't use immediately has a 20-year carry forward as well. Now, there's a limit as to how much can be used towards payroll. There's also other constraints as to it's got to be on a current return to offset for payroll. But relative to tax having a credit that could go towards taxable income, we could actually go back and do amended returns as well and capture 3 years worth. So the value is significant. And at the state level, depending on where the people are located, and that's really the key, is where they're physically located. as I said earlier, there's state credits, and that could be another 5 to 7% depending on the state and what their approach is, and it varies. Some are very generous, and some are more admittedly cosmetic.
Wow. Wow. So I mean, they could be looking at 15, 17% tax
Yeah, it could
credit.
be very material. I mean, and again,
Wow, that's
we
sort of
start off with focusing on the federal side because the states,
right.
candidly, if you can't use the state credit, it may not make sense. So you've got to also have obligations. So I'll use Texas as kind of one of my favorite examples because we don't have a state income tax. So the natural assumption would be, well, Texas isn't going to have a credit, but actually we do. It offsets our franchise taxes. And so things just differ based on state and objectives. But regardless of the state credit, which is certainly valuable, the federal credit always exists. And that's an opportunity that's got to be mined. And it's not just within the contiguous states, even territories like Puerto Rico. We've got a client who's in Puerto Rico that has development team members that they're also eligible for the credit.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Even outside, well,
It's
Puerto
within
Rico,
the US. So that, and
it's
again,
within the
that's an
US, but
extreme, but the point being, it's worth investigating. And yeah, absolutely, to your point, we should be reached out to see how we can help. Our goal is to help companies identify, help them to qualify, quantify, document, make the claim. You know,
exactly. Exactly.
that's
Yeah. I think we got introduced because we run in the same circles.
Mhm.
We're both kind of at the the tip of the innovation spear for these companies that are, creating new products. I'm
Absolutely.
involved with those companies that are creating new software products or new, widgets, new mechanical devices. Those are the companies that I get involved with. And so when I found out about the work that you were doing, I was excited because, hey, I want to trade, save my clients money, as well, right? They have more
Well,
money for their budget.
you're at the very tip. I mean, there's
Yeah,
one of the most critical things that we have to do is substantiate the credit. Why the
right,
value? Is it supportable? There's few more better means, rather, of substantiating that credit than a patent. It's not
right,
required, but
right.
it is exceptional in terms of being able to show demonstrably that a company made a financial investment, controls the intellectual property, and
Yes,
created something. Now, that said, they also could make that investment, it can fail. They don't have to be successful in their efforts to benefit from the credit. And that's also a big miss in that we've talked to a number of companies that have said, oh, I worked on this project or I came up with this invention and it didn't work. That's
yeah,
okay. The objective is to stimulate the experiment, to make the
right,
bet, to try. It's not a guarantee of success. So although the test should seek to either increasing functionality, reliability, performance, it's
yes,
not a requirement that it succeeds, and it's not a requirement that it's a material gain in terms
right.
of intersect objectives. It's the effort that's being rewarded. And that's without that, we're not going to have, any type of innovation that occurs.
Right, exactly. Yeah, on my side, I ask my clients, do you own your business idea? And they're sort of like, what is that? What do you mean? Of course I know. You don't unless you register it,
Right.
right? You
Well,
don't have ownership, and it leads to a lot of heartbreak, for some of my clients or some clients that come to me later, and they're like, I have this infringement lawsuit. Somebody's suing me. This is my business. I've been doing. Well, did you register? Did you get a
right.
patent? Did you? And no, they didn't. And then they're facing a lot of trouble.
It's tough.
But
It's a big
yeah,
mistake. A lot of times, and I found this back, on the venture side, a lot of times they also don't realize that even the work that they have in their own employees, they don't own their IP because they haven't sought out legal counsel in advance and made sure that they have right agreements in place such that their employees actually are bound by an assignment of venture clause that says this work that we're investing in is assigned to the company. And so
yeah,
there are times when it walks out the door.
yeah. Totally, totally. I mean, they don't know that they have to have that in some kind of an employment agreement. I mean, a
Right.
lot of companies do, but we're talking early stage. They might not have. a handshake,
Right.
or there's no employment agreement at all,
Right.
so it's tough. So I think it's a good idea, right? You can use patents to show that you are doing R&D. That's kind of the ultimate proof
Absolutely.
that you're creating something new, useful, and it's an invention. So I have a question. So most of my
Mhm.
clients are local here in Georgia. So what does Georgia have in terms of like a state R&D tax credit? What are its major elements? Can you
So
tell us?
Georgia does have a credit for one. The starting point is that anyone who's pursuing the Georgia credit does need to first pursue the federal credit. So you can't just go for Georgia, not federal. But why would you do
Okay.
that anyways?
Right,
Um,
right. The federal credit's
so
larger, right? Probably
Right,
most.
right. I mean, it would be a big mistake. Relative to that, though, Georgia's got a credit based on it's about 10% of qualified research over a base amount without getting to the complexities of how base amount gets calculated, but it can be very meaningful. And
Yeah.
so, that's really kind of the big takeaway is there is something that's meaningful worth pursuing. Um, Georgia's credits changes over time, and so in 2025, the time period in which one can have carry forwards is going to be reducing. It used to be 10 years. It's going to drop down to about 5 years starting in
Uh,
2025, but that also can change. That's the one thing about the state credits is you have to stay on top of them because they do change sometimes from year to year. Other times they don't change at all. But the most important thing relative to Georgia is to look into it, to engage, to not
right.
presume that you're not eligible. And to me, that goes back to most significantly, companies, what we hear more often than anything else is, especially from startups, is it's too early. I'm not ready. I have things I need to do. It isn't too early. In fact, the time to be doing it is in the very beginning because that's
Yeah,
where the impact is greatest. And the
yeah,
assumption that you have to be making money is a huge mistake. It's not about the revenues. In fact, pre-revenue companies, in my opinion, are the biggest beneficiaries mathematically
yeah.
because they can offset, not only can they're immediately benefiting once they have that first employee. And it's beyond
Right.
employees. It's also if they've got third parties, there's other considerations, supplies, cloud computing, but certainly labor is the major component. And independent contractors can add a lot to the creation of that value.
Sure, sure. Yeah, it can be used to offset all kinds of expenses, right? Not
Well,
just
it captures all kinds of things. The offset's going to be against payroll taxes, but at some point, then the costs are fungible. Once you've got the credit, if I'm not spending that money on my payroll taxes, I could be spending it on better legal counsel or hiring more employees to pursue additional innovation and growth.
right. Exactly, exactly. I know. So locally, there's an extraordinary amount of business growth in Georgia in warehouse automation,
Mhm.
data centers, um, robotics in general,
Yeah.
and artificial intelligence. Companies that are doing writing software, creating new types of in, ways to implement artificial intelligence into existing software systems, or trying to change the way they've previously done something,
Right.
solving old problems with new artificial intelligence models. Could those companies take advantage of the R&D tax credits locally in Georgia and the federal tax
Uh,
credit as
yeah, absolutely. We've talked with companies just by example that worked with a lot of artificial intelligence companies. And again, people think about artificial intelligence, they think of software. They
well?
don't also immediately think of the fact that AI has been around for over 20 years. It's machine learning. And machine learning is being applied to all kinds of applications, including one company we spent time with is focused on industrial controls. Controlling
Oh,
your HVAC, making sure you're optimizing those costs. We've worked
right,
with robotics companies that are moving warehouse equipment around. In the manufacturing space in particular, any investment in the process, it's not just about product or software, it's also about the process that's
right.
eligible in Georgia or federally. And so it could be that they have enhanced the design. It could be
Uh,
that they've improved the production process. It could be that they've done cost engineering to reduce the cost. They may be investing in material sciences, different materials, different applications. So there's the spectrum that we would look at is much broader again than most people immediately think of. And absolutely, Georgia is ground zero. I mean, a lot of aerospace and defense in particular takes place in
Yeah,
Georgia. And
it's
it's not
true.
the first place that people always think of,
Right, right. But that is that it is a there is a lot of industry, Lockheed,
for
a
sure.
lot of defense industry companies here that probably aren't aware of these R&D tax credits that they could be taking advantage of. And it'd be a significant sum,
And it's all
significant.
across the industry. It's not just, again, it's not just the Lockheeds or the Boeings that are taking advantage of it. It's typically it's their suppliers. It's what we say relative to the automotive industry. It's
Yeah,
not
that's
Ford
right.
that's coming
Yeah,
up with the innovation. Tesla's unique. Usually it's the suppliers that are coming up with the innovation, the precision engineering to make the wheels, to make the motors, to make the engines, the materials sciences that goes into it. In the case of you mentioned Lockheed. I mean, the all of the engineering that's going into solid state fuel is a huge evolutionary area. Aerodynamics. There's
right.
so much in terms of material management. I mean, carbon fiber. The number of insights and inventions that came out of NASA would shock everybody. Including basically the diapers for those that have parents.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. There's a lot of R&D going on, especially in Georgia. They we're called the Silicon Peach now because there's a lot of innovation in software and computer innovations. I mean, we have powerhouse university like Georgia Tech and Emory, so
Emory.
yeah, so there's a lot going on. So can you tell us a little bit about how the credit is determined? The credit,
So so the credit amount. So we look at so the biggest component typically is going to be labor. It's going to be wages. It's going to be the core compensation someone has outside. It's going to exclude certain fringe benefits.
uh-huh.
But on top of wages, we then look at eligible cloud computing, eligible contract research, and eligible supplies. Relative to so wages are obviously going to be your own employees, but
Yeah,
it's beyond your
that's
own
a huge,
employees.
huge part of
It,
it.
right. So relative to cloud computing, a decade or two ago, everyone had their own infrastructure. Now everybody uses AWS or Microsoft or Google, or someone else for their cloud infrastructure. That work
Right.
that's tied to R&D is eligible for the credit.
So
Contract,
if
sorry.
sorry to interrupt you, but you piqued my interest there. So if a lot of these my clients are AI,
Uh-huh.
a lot of my clients are AI innovators. They're creating new so using AI to solve a lot of
Right.
problems. So and they don't have, they're using AWS or Google
Everyone
Cloud
does.
Computing.
Right.
So and it can be extremely expensive,
Right. So
at
there's a
times.
carve. So anyone who's running the AWS, usually you're going to have different controls as to what's being used. And so the elements that are associated with that infrastructure with R&D are eligible. So we're able to
Wow,
capture that. Contract
wow.
research. People also often think, well, my contract research, is always going to be eligible. Well, it depends. If that work is being done in the United States, it's eligible. Otherwise, we have to carve out the work that's done internationally, even if they
Okay.
have and if they have a U.S. firm with international resources, we focus on the resources that are U.S. based. In those cases, there is a discount that goes because it's not full-time employees, so it's a 35% discount. But the other things we have to look at in that case is there are other considerations. Who's taking the financial risk? So we have to look at the contracts and
Yeah.
who has the ownership rights, the substantial rights to the intellectual property being created. So that's on the contract research side. On the cloud side that I mentioned earlier, we have to look at, who owns the servers, who owns the computers, are they located offsite, who manages and operates those. So again, there's deeper analysis that takes place, and then supplies. So in the case of a product company, this one gets even more interesting in that you can actually, as a company, have a prototype work that's done outside the United States, in Asia, in Europe, in South America. As long
Right.
as you bring the prototype back to America for testing, then we can actually capture that as supplies. Um,
Wow.
and then
Wow.
there's some
Okay.
extraneous,
That's interesting.
extreme situations. So one extreme situation that we're actually looking at, we've had some dialogue with, is a company that's focused on quantum computing. Well, in order to freeze to be able to do that analysis, they're investing incredible amounts of money in the refrigeration units above and beyond. And so there
Okay.
are potentially some other considerations and captures that are out there. But all of that rolls up into the bucket of qualified research. And then we apply the formulas. In the case of, federal, again, the simple rule of thumb for every $1 million invested, which you
Uh,
can get there pretty quickly, there's going to be a tax credit. And if the company is less than, meets the startup criteria, then we can apply it towards offsetting their payroll taxes, which means immediately, right after they file their tax return, the very next quarter, when they start filing their quarterly statements, instead of having to pay those dollars, they're able to point to that election, which we do. And those are dollars that don't have to go out the door. So again, more
right.
dollars to invest. So again, the roll up is, capturing the respective costs, and then it's all about, where does it get applied?
Awesome. Awesome. I mean, this sounds amazing. But a lot of these smaller companies, I mean, they probably want to have your services, but how expensive is this going to be?
Right.
How are you compensated? Do you require a $5,000 retainer to get started? How do you
So
work?
So our model is completely performance driven. I think that one of the things of having come out of worked for a lot of different companies, including the enterprise software space, where historically you would charge for perpetual license, you charge for professional services, and maybe it works. Depending on who you are, if it doesn't work and you're somewhere else and you blame the company, for everyone else, you realize there's more work to do. In our case, though, and in this, our whole focus is about being aligned with our customers. So we are completely performance success based. We don't charge a retainer. We don't
So it's
charge hourly.
contingency. So
So
you
if
guys
we
work on
can't
contingency basically.
yeah, if the value's not there, we'll be the first to say that because we have that alignment and we'll spend time with them. We'll typically have a 30-minute to an hour discussion, understanding what are their projects, what are the elements that are involved, employees, third parties, and then
Wow.
we'll give an estimate. Here's the work, and they'll make a decision. Do they want to engage us to do the federal study? The states as well. And if they don't, sometimes it may not make sense. It may be too small. And we'll say, look, let's look at this next year. In other cases, they've missed it. And we'll say, not only do we want to look at this year, but let's also go back a couple of years because of the
Awesome.
fact that,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Randy, for taking the time to talk
oh
to
my gosh,
everybody today.
I
How
always say
would
I
we
love
get
this
in touch
topic.
with you?
So,
How
sorry.
would we get in touch? How would we get in touch with you?
So the best way is really to reach out, go to our website, which is sort of easy, which is earned, as you said, without the second EARND.co. And
Yeah,
there's literally a start today where someone can start provisioning their information.
awesome.
You can connect to us, certainly through our LinkedIn as well. But you know, it's all about connecting. Or the best is to go through one of your trusted advisors, your patent
Right,
registrar lawyers.
right, right.
Certainly, hopefully,
Yeah,
they would be making the introduction. But reach out to us, and then whatever resource we can be, that is why we exist, is to help companies be
yes.
successful.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Hey, thanks again, Randy. I appreciate you taking the time. Earned.co, EARND.co. So reach out to Randy if you need some help. Thanks again.
Please let us
Talk
help
to
you
you
find
later,
anything
Randy.
treasure. Thank you.